So let's get the introduction, you guys. It is top of the hour, 1 o'clock Eastern time. Denny Grimes here, Denny Grimes, Mastery of Real Estate. Thank you for being part of this. We have a lot of regulars. This has been going on for several years. You're welcome to join us live by going to dennysmastery.com or I'll show you a QR code here in a minute. And what we do, you guys, is we work on any questions you have on a mastery level. However, all of our conversations are based on questions. Question-based, listing enhanced. You'd be shocked at how better your conversations will be when you listen. And then, of course, question-based, listing enhanced conversations. Today is August 2nd. It is August already. And we have about 200 and some odd videos on my YouTube channel, the Mastery of Real Estate, Denny Grimes, Mastery of Real Estate. If you've not subscribed, do so. My goal is to get up to 1,000. Now I'm going to start with, in fact, I'm going to put that up there. If you want the QR code, if you want to join us, if you're watching us via YouTube, there's a QR code. You can join us live. It's absolutely free. You can watch and participate, whatever you want to do. So this is your hour. I've got a couple of things I may want to cover. However, I'd like to have you guys go first. Susan, for example, one of our regulars from the West Coast had a situation. Anybody else? Let's deal with what you want to deal with, which can be NAR related, could be something different, etc. Louise is my co-host, and my co-host is Don from Scottsdale. Thank you guys for being on here. So, Susan, you had a question. So, when you bring it up, and let's talk about it.
Okay. So in a listing presentation, we want to be able to, obviously you do your song and dance, and then after a while you talk about, well, have you heard of the National Association of Realtors settlement? And they say, oh yeah, so that way I don't have to pay for, depending on how they respond back. I just want to hear how we would talk about it with the seller, and that is how we can talk about the commission and how that's going to be moving forward. And that, yeah, I'm not articulating today very well.
Okay, well, all right. So I'm assuming then you're on your listing presentation, you're bringing it up, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let me ask you this. How did you bring up professional fee? We don't say commission, but it's professional fee, for example. How did you deal with the professional fee prior to NAR upsetting the apple cart?
So I typically will, so I did my song and dance with the presentation. And then what I do is I whip out my, the call form. I mean, the listing presentation. I mean, the agreement, the listing agreement form, right? And then we will walk down, I will explain everything in step to them, how, I guess, like the terms and stuff like that. Once we get to the commission, I would say, okay, this is, whatever bananas it is. And of this bananas, I pay, from this bananas, I pay this bananas out to this particular agent, the brokers, the cooperating broker agent. And okay, that's how I normally would do it.
Well, let me give you and this is a great conversation, and I'm going to give you my blink on it. We can role play it. You guys can add some input. Here's the way that it's falling on the way that I work it. I don't think it's any different. Here is the essence. On a listing presentation, ever since Noah was alive, we would have to go in there, have some sort of value proposition. Here is our professional fee, correct?
Yes.
Then we'd have a conversation about how that fee was distributed. Now, did sellers give us pushback before the NAR issue? Yes. How did we overcome that? We overcame that by, okay, the value we offer. So let's just look at it this way from a 1,000-foot view. Why can't our listing presentation be value proposition? Our listing fee is, our professional fee to expose your home is X. And I'm just going to say $2.50. All right. Now, and so, okay. So for example, and maybe we don't even talk about the other fee what we compensate the buyer's agent until they agree to hire us. I'm just saying this, just like price, right? Or you can say, okay, so our fee is $2.50. And then how does that sound? Does that sound fair to you? Or do you feel like proceeding? All right, so what are you selling? You're selling your value proposition at $2.50, correct? Anybody have any problem with that? That's kind of the way we've done it.
So far,
Except,
good.
except we put it together. So then based on that and based on everything, are you ready to move forward? Now, why not ask the closing question right there? And well, sure. And all right, so awesome. So now that we've agreed to work together, let me share with you the pros and cons of buyer agent compensation. And go through what? The pros and cons, or the value proposition of what that fee should be, and counsel them. And why can it be a menu? Well, I was just talking to Tanner a minute ago. He's kind of balled up with the same thing too. But in the past, he always had a $3, $4, or $5 fee. Here are the choices, and here's the advantages of each one. Then let them select it. Now, that's how I think, without thinking on this for hours and hours, makes sense. What do you guys think about that?
You mean the menu of the buyer's fee, then have him decide? Because that's my confusion. I'm like, if you give him an option, they would always go with one apple. That's it. That's
Wait.
Hold on. Will they though? Will
Yeah,
they?
thanks, Matt. That's a take your plan, because you said you had a flexible fee or a staggered fee. Then if you think that, why do your sellers always go with the lowest fee?
Not necessarily.
Tanner, if I may interject any. Tanner, I sent a pre-listing package to a person I've never met with. They have a best friend that's a realtor that's always listed their properties. They're a builder. This client's a builder, potential client. I sent in my pre-listing package. I've added value. I've discussed the potentiality of keeping the property as a rental. If it makes dollars, it makes sense. In other words, I'm not cramming me selling their house down their throat. He and his wife called me while they were shopping for a car down by Denny the other day. So they're out shopping for a car, and they said, you know what, Matthew, we want to sell the house. Let's have this conversation, figure out what the potential value is, etc. They reviewed my pre-listing package, and he said, yeah, we want to list for 7% because we don't want to deal with having to do the staging, do the painting, blah, 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 blah. That's the most expensive bracket I have. But nowhere in there did I have to overcome an objection. It was just the value proposition. So what you focus on expands. And no, they will not always take the least expensive option. They will not.
When you go to get your car washed, they offer generally more than one option, right? How many people always check one or the other? They don't. So let's go back to, why don't we have a conversation with this about it? What do you think about the idea that when you have your listing presentation, you break it apart? And again, I wouldn't be timid about the NAR thing. I wouldn't even bring it up. I wouldn't even bring it up unless they do. And if you are going to bring it up, I would say there's good news. I would always say that. What's good about it? It's going to be more transparent. Now, likely the dollars don't change. However, how the dollars are distributed might. You see how simple? So, does that help you, Susan?
Yes, I guess. I'm sorry.
I think I know Susan fairly well. I think she's looking for a practical way to present it, if I understand it. And what I always, so I wait, what you focus on expands. I wait for it to come up. Hey, well, I hear I don't have to pay commissions anymore. Yeah, what do you understand about that? That's how I tee it up. What do you understand about that? Okay. And they say, well, I just hear I don't have to pay it. Okay. Well, really, the National Association of Realtor lawsuit, the settlement really only accomplished two things. Would you like to know what those two things are? Okay. The first thing is that sellers can and still most likely will incentivize buyer's agents to bring buyers because you want the property sold, right? You want to sell the property. Okay, so we want to, sellers will likely still incentivize buyer's agents like they always have because nothing's possible without the buyer's money. So you really weren't paying it in the first place. Okay. The only change with commissions is that we can no longer wave a red flag in the MLS to what we're going to compensate those buyer's agents. So they can't steer buyers to us because we offer more incentive. Make sense? Okay. The second aspect that's going to change is for about 100 years, real estate's been like the wild, wild west. Okay. It's not been a professional industry. The threshold for entry has been very low. For about 100 years, you call an agent, they run out the door with no questions asked, and they show you a property, and they require nothing. Okay, that it's not going to work like that anymore. Moving forward, you're going to have to, if you call me to show you a property, I'm going to have to meet with you, disclose to you how I'm going to represent you and what I charge. Okay, and you're going to have to agree to that. So it's no longer going to, it's going to be a professional business, not a sea of part-timers. That's good, right? That's it. That's
Yeah.
how I present.
I actually like that. I heard it from somewhere, believe it or not, some YouTuber, and he mentioned that now it's really not about fast, it's about the skills. The skill
Right.
agent is going to be
It's not a
staying.
market, it's a skill market.
Yeah. Whenever markets change, it switches. I've always said it like this. In 2007, 2004 through 2007, 2017 and 2018, when the market was shifting, those are the two shifts I've been through personally. My family's been through the .com and all that crap. But I've always said, the good markets are relationship-based markets, meaning you just do business with anybody that you know that has a license and a pulse. Okay. Whenever the market shifts, it becomes a skills-based market. Only the most skilled realtors will survive. Why? Because they have the skill and expertise to have the tough conversations that have to be had to transact in this market. That's all we're moving into right now.
So why don't we role play this a couple different ways if you want to, if you want some practical knowledge. Susan, I'll go ahead and take, you can be one of your sellers if you want. And again, I don't know if your challenge is presenting it, but let's just assume we're at the table and I'll take a shot at it. Matt can take a shot at it. We'll take a couple minutes and then we'll spread it around. The issue is this. Most of you here are well accomplished on doing things the way they used to be because you understood it, you practiced it, you got rid of the gremlins in your mind. Getting used to this is the same process. The gremlins in your mind. So Susan, are you ready to move forward with me today? Well, where's my thing? I'll get 2 minutes going here.
Should I start now?
Yes.
Okay, you know what, Denny, thanks, but I heard it on the news that the real estate market is changing. We don't have to pay for a commission anymore.
Okay. And just for the fun of it here, let me just stop that for a minute. Remember, let's never get away from basics, right? So, all right, other than that, is there anything else that's maybe holding you back on moving forward with me today?
No.
All right, so that's the isolation. So if we can agree on compensation, are you ready to put me to work for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Now we've already discussed in the listing presentation that my fee is $2.50. Do you have any questions about that?
No.
Right. So the question then, now that we've agreed to work together, do you mind if I move my chair on your side of the table and give you some counseling on strategic positioning?
Sure, the house is gonna sell. I have tons of time. The house will sell. I have tons of time, I'm not in a rush.
Got that. So let's talk in terms of, okay, so the question is what do you want to, what would you want to compensate a buyer's agent to bring you acceptable contract?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you said that you heard, I think you brought up NAR. So we have to decide now, just like we've agreed on the fee for me to sell your home from a listing standpoint. So what do you want to put into our price to compensate the buyer's agent.
Yeah, like I say, I don't need to pay for anything.
You don't need to, however, that's not new. Sellers have never needed to. So my question is this, if your home could sell for more money or faster, would you consider then adding money to your net in order to compensate a buyer's agent? That's 2 minutes right there. So I'll finish this up.
Honestly, probably not. The house will sell, so I'm not paying $1 more than to your service.
Okay. All right, so now if somebody is at that point, now Matt, you can start over if you want, or you can take it from that point. Just generally speaking, a seller in that position, if they've agreed on my fee, I'm still taking the listing. If they're at that position and I get the right price, guess what? My listing will sell.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not, and I had a conversation with somebody on my team about this today. I'm not walking away with the listing if they've already agreed on what they're going to pay me. Because if they can be realistic enough and it's priced right, guess what? It'll sell. And the other agent had better be professional enough and no longer Wild Wild West, Matt, to have an agreement with their compensation.
Right. Yeah. It's on them now. I mean, I love this change because we don't have to negotiate, not against our sellers, but we don't have to negotiate for the buyer's agent. It's on them. Our job just got easier. But it is now incumbent upon us to help our client self-discover, just like we always have, the value in incentivizing other people to show the property. Because there's still value in that. It's just a question of what do you want to do with it.
So Matt, last week I don't know if you were on last week, we used a car dealership. Who remembers the car dealership analogy that we used? Can somebody recite that? Let's see how you do.
Okay. So Denny, have you purchased a car?
Yeah.
So let's imagine you're looking to purchase a new car, and the car that you like with the same features, benefits, and model. The first shop you go, it's at $500, everything included. The second shop you go, the same car, everything 500 plus. Now you have to pay for the seller's fee on top of that.
That's in essence what the analogy was. Now, just to kind of give you a little sandpaper on that, use real numbers when it comes to cars.
Yeah.
You may not do it on your fee, but you can say, if you're going to pay $70,000 for that Cadillac, and you go to another over here and say, well, it's the Cadillac in the next dealership, it's $70,000, but there's an asterisk. I have to pay the fee for the salesperson. Where I most likely shop. So yes, I mean, can it hurt the seller not to have a compensation program for the buyer? Yes. And here, one more point. This may be too advanced for some of you guys that like noodle. It may be cheaper to pay the buyer's agent $2 or $2.50 than it is to lower the price enough to have people show it with zero compensation.
Right. Yep. That's actually how I work to overcome the objection. Say, hey, which pain would you rather endure? The pain of offering incentive to a buyer's agent to sell the home today, or the pain of having to sell your home for $100,000 less in 6 months if it's not sold?
Denny, I have a question in that specific scenario. Say like I was the seller and we got to like the buyer's compensation. I would ask you, okay, Denny, so how much should I offer?
Well, okay, I would turn it around and ask the question. Okay, so if you were the car dealer and there's competition out there, can you understand that the more incentive you offer, the more buyers will be showing your home first? Do you see an advantage in that? Can you see how maybe an auction environment can be created that would offset that extra fee? Matt?
Hey, Tanner, did you know that the average agent sells 2 to 3 homes a year?
Wow.
It's not a lot, right?
No, not at all.
The reason being is they have a husband or a wife that has a full-time job that pays for the Jaguar, so they don't have to sell property. But let's say that you're one of those agents and you're a little short on your car payment, and you really need to make a sale. Okay, and you got one home that is 2%, one home that's not offering anything, and one home that's 4%. Which one would you be most inclined to want to get your client to buy? Whatever it takes.
The highest, yeah.
Right?
See see how Matt spins the stories? I think he should write children's books.
I think that's good. I'll try. I'll take that as a compliment. But then, so when Tanner, that's how I'd answer that question. Well, what do you think we should ask? Well, Jesus, whether you believe in Jesus, the universe, whatever, Jesus in the Christian faith he sold the faith on parable. He sold the faith on parables. And facts tell, stories sell. I always like to tell a story. So it's like, hey, when anybody says, I don't want to pay the commission, how do you think that's going to benefit you? Well, I'll make more money. But what do you get if the home doesn't sell? Well, nothing. Right. So let's say that you're a hungry buyer's agent that is about to lose their house because it's been a tough market and you really need to make a sale. And you're going to be showing 3 properties this weekend. One's going to give you 100,000, one's going to give you 0, and another one's going to give you 20,000. Which one do you think the buyer's agent's going to be most excited to show their buyer and negotiate in your best interest?
See, one thing that we might want to do before the changeover, because our MLS is, I think, already taken compensation out, and you can kind of guesstimate it. However, you're not going to be able to look at MLS anymore and find out what percent is offering what. So you can say, well, hey, basically, let me show you what's traditional of the listings that we had. 80% of them are offering $2 to $2.50, and some are offering 3, and some you give them 3 and then let them choose. Where would you like to position your home?
Right.
That's another way to do it.
Yep.
So let's go to something next. Who else wants to throw something at us or wants to try handling an objection? We will help you get better.
Hey, Danny. This is Elise. I had a quick question since we're talking about this. What happens if, I'm just thinking ahead. So what happens if the buyer reaches out to the, I have a property on the market, right? I'm listing it. And the buyer reaches out to me wanting me to do the deal. How do you address that with the seller? Because let's say I've negotiated 3% for my commission. The seller's not giving anything to the buyer's agent. And this buyer doesn't have an agent. They're coming directly to me.
That's okay. That's okay. It doesn't change. You have the same conversation with the buyer. Hey, Miss, you can be the buyer. How do you say your name? Madelise?
Madelise.
Madelise. When you buy this home, do you want somebody to represent your best interest and ensure that the terms and conditions are in your favor?
That depends. If it's going to cost me, no, I don't want to have to pay for a buyer's agent.
Okay, so just so that I understand, if you found out that when you make an offer on this property, the other agent is going to be negotiating against you, trying to get the best deal for their client, and it could cost you much more money, you wouldn't want somebody to negotiate in your favor.
So hang on, I'm going to pause you because I want to get some clarity here. Now Madeline is the listing agent. So are you suggesting she becomes a dual agent?
Well, transactional.
Can't be a transaction if you're going to negotiate one side over the other. So now she's the listing agent. The buyer wants her to reference. She's getting $3 to list the home, but seller's not going to compensate the buyer's agent. So the buyer wants to buy the house with a listing agent and they expect them to do it, quote, for the $3.
That's my question. That's my question. How do you address that? Do you go back to the seller and say, hey, I need to up my commission now 1% because now I'm doing extra work?
Okay,
And
I
I'll be there.
misunderstood that. Yeah, forgive me.
That's
Okay, so yeah, that's okay. So you're asking the buyer comes to you, you're the listing agent. I want you to write this deal up. I'm not paying anything.
Right.
Right. The buyer's not paying anything. Now, do you go back to your seller and say, hey, I'm going to be doing extra work. I'm going to show up for inspections and appraiser and all these things? Or how do you address that? I'm just brainstorming out loud. I'm not in that situation right now, but I'm just wondering if I were to be, how do you go about that?
So while you think about that, Matt, here's how I'm glad you're bringing this up because I've been rolling this around in my brain. I think we should cover that in the listing appointment. Meaning if what's going to happen, if a buyer does not want to pay a fee, however, wants your house, and you don't want to pay the buyer's agent, what's going to happen, just warning you that the paperwork that comes in, the offer that comes in, the buyer is going to be requesting money to be paid to their agent. Are you aware of that? You don't have to accept anything that you don't want to accept. However, I just wanted you to prepare you for that. Now, when you write up the offer, you're going to put on there, you want an apple or two to do it. What do you think of that, you guys? Matt, what do you think of that?
Yeah, actually, that's right where I was going to go. I would have the conversation with my client. So I already have a flexible fee built in where if 89% of the time we're going to have what's called a co-broke, I'm explaining as if I explained to a seller. 89% of the time, another agent's going to find the buyer for your property. Okay, but in the event that happens, we're going to offer them X. Let's say that I find the buyer for the property, though. I'm going to incentivize you, my client, and I'm going to give you a discount. This is what I'm going to charge if I find the buyer for your property. Are you okay with that? Okay, and then that's it. You're done. You deal with the seller. So if a buyer comes to you, the only obligation you have to that buyer is say, hey, I'm happy to write the deal for you, but I represent my client in their best interest. So we're not going to have any representation. Are you sure you want to go into this with a professional fighter, me fighting against you?
So that kind of comes down to, in my opinion, if the house is a little bit overpriced and you're not getting, you're getting a lot of showing, but you're not getting offers in, but you have a buyer that comes in and say, hey, will you represent me? This is where you broach the idea with the seller, hey, you know what? I have a lot of showing, but there's no offer yet. The only offer that I have is this particular one, but I'm representing them. Would you pay me a commission to represent that person?
See, I think it's going to be hard after you've listed the home and you're getting, your $2 or $3 to sell the home. To put a dollar figure on it, you're getting $20,000 to $40,000 in a commission, maybe more. Be the listing agent, and now you have a buyer that wants to buy it through you, and you're going to go back and ask the seller for more money.
Yeah, no, you got to have that conversation. That's why I said if another agent finds a buyer, here's the fee. If I find the buyer, good news is I'm giving you a discount, and it's going to be this. It has to happen in the listing appointment, because if you do run into that situation where you get a buyer that wants no brokerage representation, and I saw a really good video on he's in Chicago area. My partner, one of my accountability partners, knows him well, but an agent saying, yeah, you're going to have a lot of buyers coming to you that want no brokerage representation. That's fine. You write the offer and you send it to the buyer, just like you're giving the offer to a buyer's agent. And if that's what they want, that's what they get. No representation. So here's the offer. Okay? And you let the buyer do the work, kind of thing. But where I'm going with that is this. They don't know how to do contracts at all. They don't know how to negotiate contracts. They don't know inspection periods, escrow, etc. So you very much earn, if you wanted to charge that buyer anything, which is kind of where this conversation started, you send them the contract and say, all right, well, get back to me when you're ready to present the offer. Well, what do you mean? I thought you were going to write it. Well, no, I don't represent you. So here's the offer. Get back to me when you're ready to present it.
Hey, Matt, when you send that, do you also send one of the brokerage agency forms?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because if she's saying I'm not going to pay you anything, you know, I want to work. You're the listing agent. I want to make an offer on your property. I don't want anybody to get paid. Okay, great. So what I'm hearing you say that is you do not want representation. It's called no brokerage representation. Is that right? Okay, great. Here's the offer form. Here's no brokerage representation. When you're ready to present the offer, let me know.
So just for clarity, okay, so now I had to listen twice. He's not sending the offer, he's sending the paperwork that's blank.
Yeah.
Yes, because that's
I
what you
think-
asked for.
But I think to Matthew's point, when you're building a fee schedule, okay, this is my fee, let's say 3 apples. If there's a buy with no a dual representation, it's 4% of 4 apples. And if you're going to pay a commission, or the option is you're going to pay a commission to the cooperating broker, it's going to be 5 or 6%. And then decide which one do you want to choose. I like
Right.
that.
Well, hang on though, hang on, I got that. However, Matt, I'm not paying anything to the buyer's agent, 0.
So that's my question, Danny. I'm still not very clear.
I know, I know where you're coming from, Natalie. So your flexible fee will work with 90% of the sellers, but this seller is not going to agree to any I'm paying you $2.50 as my listing agent, and I'm paying 0 for anybody who's representing the buyer. Now, Natalie is asking, now the buyer, and what we're going to do is, what's going to happen, it will happen naturally. We did this during COVID. We're going to train buyers to come to us. And because the buyers are thinking they're going to save fees, and they are going to save fees. So if the seller's not going to offer any compensation, the fact you're going to do it for a little bit isn't a discount to them. So that's the question.
So you're
Isn't that
saying
all
that
the more
basically
reason?
you're representing both sides. Well, like in this scenario, I have to take a look. If I'm getting offers in with other agents, I'm not going to bother with this. Unrepresented buyer. I'm just going to go with others because it's too much work and a lot of responsibility on my brokerage, right?
Well,
Hang on, fate will have it. You'll run into that seller one day at Whole Foods. And they'll somehow know about it. So how can we be pure in our representation to a client that we're making $40,000 or $80,000 on, and say, well, there was just too much work to, and that seller's mind, that offer would have been a better one, and you'll never talk them out of that. So we kind of have an ethical challenge here as well.
Yep. Look
Isn't that
up.
all
Yeah.
the more reason
Danny?
to
Go
do
ahead.
what Pat is saying and just discuss these scenarios at the beginning? That's all the more reason.
Yeah, well, that's how you overcome the issue altogether, and that's what I think Denny and I are in complete agreement there. Is you have the conversations at the beginning, but sorry, I have to address what Susan just mentioned. Roger Pettengill got his ass sued off. I think Denny knows Roger Pettengill because he's kind of right in our area. But he got sued because of allegedly not presenting an offer in this situation. So we have an obligation to our sellers to present all offers that are in writing presented. So
your deal though, Matt, is this is kind of novel, and Don will come to you, get your hand up. Your deal is like, sure, well, here's a paperwork, go hire a seller.
Right, no, that's right. That's how everybody that's hearing my voice right now and ever hears it regarding this topic, that's how you handle it. If the buyer comes to you and says, you're the listing agent, I don't want you to represent me, but I want you to write the offer, or I want to work through you, great. I'm not going to represent you. I'm not going to charge you anything. Here's the documentation. Have fun. When they call you and say, well, no, I thought you were going to fill it out. No, I don't represent you. I represent the seller. Well, what the buyer says, what should I do? Well, you can call an attorney, but they're going to charge you thousands of dollars to do this. Well, no, I don't want to pay. Okay, well, you don't, you represent yourself, or I can charge you X to do this. Which pain would you rather endure?
To just be transactional for that buyer, right?
What's that?
To just
Yes.
be transactional
Yes,
for that buyer.
Right. Well, you would then transition into transactional if they said, well, I don't want to pay an attorney. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So then you would be transactional.
So Don, you're
Right.
next. Hang on. And Matt, that still doesn't pass the 100% smell test. Because that seller, if they knew and they're in Florida and they're in a downward moving market, and they have to sell it for less, and again, everything we have to do, we should have in the back of our mind, someday it will see the light of day. Will it pass the smell test? That may not. Don, what's your question?
Well, this whole discussion it really hasn't changed. I mean, 20 years ago, when you list a property, or 20 days ago, well, hey, Don, if you find the buyer yourself, will you give me a break? And you just, sure, I will charge X for that if I bring a buyer. In fact, you know what? If you bring a buyer, here's a price too.
Well, that's
So if-
that's what I was explaining before, Don. Is I already
Right.
have that. It's never
Right.
changed.
This isn't a big, I don't think it's a big deal. And that way, if you do get another buyer in and they're saying, I'm not going to pay you a thing. Yeah, you can
So
have
the-
this. I was
So
going to say, you
this-
can have this discussion about no fees being paid, but you've already built it in on the other side, haven't you?
But this is great. This is a great point, Don, because because we're thinking let's say the listing fee was $2.50, and if there's a co-broke, it's going to be $5. But if there is no co-broke, I'll do both sides, not for the 2.5, but maybe 3.5. What we're doing is, and you're right, Don, I do that anyway. If a buyer finds a seller, the seller finds a buyer, I will do it less than the listing fee.
Sure.
So if it's less, there's no problem. It will pass the smell test. For example, it'll be $3. If $3. However, if a buyer wants to buy your house and I have both sides of it, I'll do it for $2.50 or $2.75. Now, you're not getting, so are you then doing the buyer for free? Not if it's your normal policy, you're willing to do it anyway.
Right.
Right. Yep. I charge my flexible fee is I charge 4% if my client finds a buyer. So that would kind of fall in that bracket.
Well, wait a minute. Then what's your fee if the standard co-broke?
If it's a standard co-broke, 6%.
And if the buyer calls you directly and it's your buyer,
If a buyer calls me, so 6% if it's 6 or 7 if it's a standard co-broke.
right?
5 if I find the buyer.
Right.
4 if my clients find a buyer for reasons other than my marketing.
There you
Okay,
go.
now I'm gonna go to Natalie. I'm gonna be Natalie. I'm gonna be the seller. Listen, what is your listing fee, Matt?
My brokerage fee 6%.
No, this is August.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So you're the seller. All right. Well, I charge 3% for my services. If I charge 3% for my services, but if you find I charge 3% for my services. We'll start there.
Okay, I'm okay with that, but I am not going to be compensated a buyer's agent fee.
Okay. How do you think that'll benefit you?
Okay, we go through that discussion, and this is Natalie's question, so we won't have to have that discussion. I understand how you may handle it. However, I'm adamant it's 3%.
Okay. Gotcha. So what, man, I don't know. So I've already overcome the objection. They're not offering compensation.
No, we've been at this for 30 hours negotiating. I'm not coming off the 3%. So the issue is now we're at that point. Again, this is what started the call. I'm taking the listing, particularly if they have motivation, because I know what's going to sell.
Right. Yeah, I think at the end of it all, as long as they agree to compensate, yeah, I take the listing, but I just say, okay, I would just end it with, hey, I hear what you're saying, Denny. You don't want to compensate a buyer's agent, but just so that we're on the exact same sheet of music, what I'm hearing you say is that even if it puts you at a financial disadvantage in the end, there's no world in which you would want to incentivize another agent to find a buyer for the property.
So now that Matt is future pacing them, okay, and in Florida, we're seeing a stagnant market or maybe downward, so there is a little bit of fear in Florida. So that could be good. However, here's how this is going back, again, we're talking about this, Natalie, this is where you'd say, listen, because you're not offering one, don't be surprised if an offer comes in that they're asking you to pay it. Or something.
Right. Well, that's where I was going with that. I'll say.
Well, let me say one more thing first, Matt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Including an agent from my office or my team, or even a buyer I'm working with. Don't be surprised if they ask. Then you can evaluate it and see if it's worthwhile to you. Now you have, number one, prepared them from what might happen. You've prepared them. If you have the buyer, you're going to add $1 or $2 to the transaction, and you told them up front, and that passes the smell test.
And that's the difference that you're adding. So say we solidify, okay, 3% for listing your property, representing you as the seller, marketing, all this stuff, right? But the difference I think here is that we're now adding an extra $1 because now we are treating this buyer as a customer to get them through the transaction because the buyer refuses to be represented. And they're not paying, right?
Well, that's why you're going to add it. You're going to put it in the contract.
Right.
All right. So now we've talked about a lot. Is there any clarity forming on you guys?
I think it's really important to be proactive, right? And say to the parties that you represent, these are the scenarios that could potentially happen. So they're prepared and you don't have to address it after the fact. And it's much unlike one of three things will happen, A, B, or C.
Well, I think we can come up with maybe three things and another three things because you're right. However, I think, and I think that Natalie, you brought up the thing that's been rolling around in my brain. If you have a seller out there and it's going to be an outlier, probably less than 5% of them won't pay anything. Mm-hmm. You're morally and ethically probably obligated if a buyer doesn't want to pay anything to make sure that they somehow get that seller knows about that buyer. You agree with that, Matt?
Yeah, that's what I was saying before. You still got to let them know, give them the information, trust them with their results.
And if you tell them up front, you can then, because you've told them up front, hey, it might even come from my office or me. So the offer then includes a compensation.
Right. Yep. Because that's how I work. I mean, for me, it's levers. And when I get to that final lever and they're still stuck, I just say, okay, well, if Mr. or Mrs. Seller, and we're at the end of this, right? We're at the very end, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, just what do you think is going to happen if we offer no incentives to a buyer or buyer's agent to buy your property and they have to pay it? What do you think they're going to do when they make you an offer? It's the same thing as a for sale by owner. What do you think they're going to do? Well, I don't know. They're going to offer you at least 6% less or more because they're trying to save the same commission you are.
Yes, so, and be careful, you guys, of building your value proposition on the fact that they don't offer money, then their property won't sell. Because the next step they're going to go after a while, when they realize their home isn't selling, okay, let's go ahead and offer a compensation to the buyer's agent. Guess what? The property's still not going to sell.
Right. Yep.
Y'all got that?
That's what I wanted to ask you.
It didn't sell the first time because it's overpriced. That's like the sellers. Remember the days, you guys, when the seller, let's add a bonus to the seller's agent.
Yep. And how I used to handle that is I'd always say, well, Mr. or Miss Seller, if we're going to offer rather than incentivizing an agent by giving them a bonus, I'd much rather how would you feel about repositioning the home?
Yeah, let's incentivize the buyer.
I don't want to incentivize the buyer's agent. Let's incentivize the buyer.
So we got a couple of hands up. Tanner, then we got Lisa. What's up, team?
you got it on point. Actually, that's what I wanted to ask you. So like they wanted to offer only like one apple, and at some point, you would ask them probably what would they think if we could increase that to 2 apples, just so we can attract. But you answered it pretty good, so thank you. That was the thing.
Yes, you guys, that's a really important point, you guys. If it's not selling, changing the compensation to 10 apples will not change that fact at all. Lisa.
Hi, my first time on the call, and thank you, Louise, for inviting me on the call, but I'm kind of antsy here. I think it's Maylie's question. I mean, and Louise really started touching on it. It's setting the expectation and having the communication, whether it's the seller or you're talking to the buyer's agent. If we haven't set up the expectation right up front, with my sellers, I'm going to say, let's look at your line items. Let's see where you need to grow, where do you need to net? And if we've hit those line items and we've had that communication up front, I, as the professional, I'm going to be prepared to hit those calls that come in. So whether they're doing no representation or representation, however that offer comes in. So if you're that agent that brings me an offer, and even there may not have been compensation, let me review that offer. And I'm going to see how that meets my seller. I mean, to me, it's almost a no-brainer. Am I wrong?
Well, I probably have to have you restate the question. The one thing that I wrote down here while you were writing, though, while I was writing where you were speaking, I would be careful on focus on what, quote, they need to net. Because in the market we're seeing in Florida right now, their need to net is less than what buyers are willing to pay.
Right. Yeah.
But doesn't that also go to our skill set? If we're pricing and if we're to whoever our customer is, I mean, this is where skill sets come in and expertise comes in. I mean, I personally don't want to take that overpriced listing. And I just ended a listing that, I had that scenario. And I also had it where a buyer came to me with no representation. But again, there were lessons definitively, but I have to get better on my conversations up front and having the harder conversations.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Go ahead.
Lisa, I actually hear what you're saying with the skill set. I do. There's a lion's share of my presentation that I will be net focused. So I say, hey, are you a seller at that net? If you can net this or you, so I'm not afraid to dwell on that, understanding that the market's only going to bear whatever the market will bear. I am, as you alluded to, if I don't feel I can meet or exceed their expectations, I'd rather shake hands and part as friends now. If they want $80,000 more than the market may bear, hey, I may not be a good fit to help you. Just because I don't want you to be disappointed in 6 months when it hasn't sold. But yes, it is a skill set thing, and we do have. I think this kind of rounds the bend on that. We do have that moral obligation and ethical obligation to present those offers as they come in. And I think that's kind of what you were just implying, is if I'm understanding.
It is, and I think everybody on this call, right, is an exceptional person because we work at our crafts, right? And I mean, we can't account for the whole market, but being exceptional, you're going to do those things. Yes.
But one thing that, and again, you're new to the call, and so there's maybe different philosophies out there. My philosophy is a couple of different things, and we'll talk about this. I believe agents should stop listing properties and start listing property owners.
Right.
And we practice that because it doesn't matter what the property is. It could be on the railroad tracks, it could be in a flight pattern, it could be a hoarder. It's the motivation and the realisticness of the sellers being in reality that causes it to sell. The experienced agent will know how to find out. Right. The next thing, though, and this is a little bit different, that you You can work on a net. However, in order to get a net, you need a sales price. And as long as the sales price comes from the seller, not us, because I do not believe in setting prices, Lisa. I believe in setting expectations. I do not believe after 40 years and 10,000 transactions, I can tell, I'm signing a contract in the next couple of days to start my book on how real estate works. And I do not believe that top market value is known until you expose it. So I'm not the traditional agent that says this is where I think you should price it. And there's a lot of reasons why we don't have time to get into that. However, I think that what you're saying is we should be skilled in to have the conversations. What am I trying to say here, guys? My conversation to you is, oh, let me just go back. When we meet, there's three things we know for sure. What's sold, that's the past, what's active, that's current, and what the market trend is. Can we predict an acceptable range that might sell in? Yeah. My question is, and this is the advanced agent, most likely, and this is what we're seeing in Florida, sellers are still in 2022, buyers are not. Sellers want to list their home higher. I'm of the method or the persuasion that I will take that because that's their number. And then we'll go into one of three outcomes, which we haven't got into yet. Man, I go through that whole paragraph to say, if you're focused on net and they're basing their net off a wrong number, it may be a destination you can never get to. So I don't know if that paragraph made any sense to anyone, but
yeah, you're helping them self-discover. I always explain, in order to sell a property, we got to sell it to three people: the buyer, the buyer's agent, and the bank appraiser. Bank appraiser is going to use homes that have sold just like yours to determine what the bank will lend on the property. Okay, second person, the buyer's agent, they're going to use homes that are under contract. It tells us where the market's going, whether that's up or down. But the most important person we have to sell the home to is the buyer. To them, we're just a can of beans on the shelf. In order to sell our home, we have to offer more value than every other home we compete against. That's what's going to be on the market. So you give them that information, and I agree with Denny, within reason. You don't set the price. You say, hey, these are our biggest competitors right here. Can you see how that might make sense? What do you think? And that's kind of what Denny's saying, is you give them the information and let them self-discover. But then you set the expectation of, hey, a properly priced home, this is how I do it. I know Denny has one of three outcomes, but hey, how do we know if we're properly priced, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? I ask him that after we talk about pricing. How do we know we're properly priced? Well, a properly priced home should get at least 2 showings per week and at least 1 or multiple offers in the first 30 days. So if we don't get that response in the first 30 days, it's not me saying anything, and it's not you saying anything, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. It's the market. And that's it.
so Louise probably put in there for the folks, Lisa, that haven't been on before, others that may be watching this form or the link to this form. Yeah, this is the form that I like, that I teach, because every listing out there, if you have a listing right now, it's not sold, it's an outcome 1 or outcome 2. So it's impossible to sell an overpriced listing. And I really think it's impossible to cause a well-priced listing, or particularly an underpriced listing, not to sell. Water will go through solid rock. The neighbors will find out, and it will sell. So if you're sitting on, there's no such thing as a well-priced listing not selling. So yeah, that would be something you can write down and talk to your friends about over happy hour. This is International Beer Day, by the way. So we got 6 minutes. Who would like to talk about something new? We got Joe Barnes. Joe Barnes probably wants to call a buy owner. Oh my gosh. What's going on, Joe?
Actually, I wanted to hear your line about top market value. Could I get that from start to finish? One more time?
This is my listing presentation, guys. I mean, you got to sell value, and you got to do, you got to show what you're doing. You build your value proposition. However, if they are interviewing other agents, I don't give prices. I'll tell them how I work. It goes like this. So Joe, let me ask you. So basically, let me share. In fact, I added another slide. Let me share with you something. I will draw this on a legal pad. Number one, I'm going to tell you something most agents won't tell you because they think it makes them look dumb. I'm going to tell you something that basically is brilliant. Number one is the top market value of your home is never known until you expose it. For example, you could, if you fish, you use a different analogy, but if you take a higher fishing guide, he's fished on a lake for 10 years. Can he tell you where the fish will bite on next Saturday? No, that's a process. You hire a professional to figure out what you have to do, change location, change the bait in order to be successful, correct? So that is not known. I can tell you that is true. And if you don't believe that's true, you just go back at any length of time. Theoretically, if you had a stagnant market, you could get pretty darn close most of the time. But you guys, we just came out of a market. I'm giving you background on this. We just came out of the market that basically you did your CMAs and then you maybe marked it up 5, 10, 20%, and it sold for $100,000 over that. So it just proved how foolish agents are that they think that we think we can predict, or that is our responsibility to predict the future. So the decision, Joe, we have to make, and if you like to hire me, I'll get specific, but this is the decision you have to make. And you can go, notice point A and B, if you can see behind me. The point, we either take an aggressive number based on what the things we know, what's sold, what's active, market trends, in which if we're wrong, we can come down. Or we can take position B, which may be a little bit aggressive, and we may get multiple showings and multiple offers. It might even be bid up a little bit. Now, here's my question. And this can be a strategy. However, if it's a great strategy, why doesn't every agent list everything at $10 and watch it get bid up? Because in theory, because physics doesn't work like that all the time. So my question is based on that, where would you want to start? And then you can actually put dollar signs on it. Here's some past sales and basically here's what people are asking. Where would you want to position? I can just tell you that more sellers will be more A focused than B focused. And I would rather say, okay, if you want that, and here's my point, then I've got numbers that aren't realistic. Really, I should update those. But if your past sales show that it's worth in the 500 range and they won 600, Joe, can you tell them for sure that the market would say no to 6? Nope.
No.
Then why don't you give them the opportunity? Because unless you do, they may list with someone else. So that's why I said, if you would start at 600, are you ready to do business with me? Remember, it's their number. So, and then I go into, hey, because we're going to work together, and you mind if I share with you what happens next? Here are the 3 outcomes. I build my follow-up system every week on the 3 outcomes. Does that answer your question, Joe?
Yep, I just wanted to hear the line, and that worked. Could I ask an extension of that? I'm late to the call here, but I'm curious. Earlier on when we were doing role play, we talked about buyer's commissions, and I tried to close without saying a seller had to do one. If they're willing to list with you right then and there, is that something you roll the dice with and go for, or do you believe that needs to be established before coming to market?
I'll let anyone. I'll go first. Matt, you go next, and we can. This is my call, so I don't have to be off the top of the hour. If we go a couple minutes longer, it's not going to be a problem. If I'm working with a seller and they have motivation, and they have no problem with my fee, now I'm going to do my best, to make sure they get it positioned correctly. However, if they're going to die on a hill that they're going to pay 0 to a buyer's agent, I'll take the listing. Matt.
Yeah, I think that Denny and I are scenario specific. We're in about the same boat on that. Rowing at the same speed. I will take the listing. I think we have a moral and ethical obligation to do so as long as we present them with the information. Number one, number two, but that doesn't mean now we on this call will operate differently, because we have skill and expertise. 99% of the other agents will just bend over and take it, but we still have a moral and ethical obligation, like Jay Abrams has talked about in the past. If you truly believe that what you have is useful and valuable, you have to present it. So we will help them self-discover how it may be in their best interest and to their detriment. But ultimately, we will take it as long as they're willing to compensate us. And then we just help them self-discover along the line if it's not working.
And there's no difference in that than taking a listing that we feel that is overpriced.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
As long as we tell them the downfall, the side effects of doing that.
Right. And then I will end with this though. And I will say, hey, Joe, we can do whatever the heck you want to do under one condition. We can do whatever you want to do, pricing, commissions, etc. There's only one condition. Would you like to know what that condition is, Joe?
Yes.
We change it if we're wrong.
Do not call me in 6 months asking me why the home hasn't sold. Because the only answer I'll have for you is the market hasn't accepted the price.
There you go. So any other comments? Anything? So you guys, thanks for hanging on. I know it was a little bit different. However, I think it's conversation that we had to work through. Did anyone have an aha or two?
As always, Denny, thank you so much. You know, like
Likewise, like the fact that now it's almost like you had to package in your listing presentation to show these are the options. Where do you want to go?
Right.
Yeah, just being upfront about it all, you know, like your listing presentation addressing all these things.
But what
I like Matt just saying, hey, you don't want representation? Great. Here's the 52 pages. Fill it out.
Right.
Let me know when you're ready and I'll present it.
Yeah, and I wanted to say two things really quickly. Number one, yes, that is how you will operate. I implore every one of you. You must operate like that because you don't represent them if that's how they choose to move forward. The agent in Chicago, that's what he was implying. You really don't. So you're just like Denny says, don't put your fingerprint on the price. Don't put your fingerprint on their offer. Here, call me when you're ready and let them figure it out. That's on them. That's how you're supposed to handle it. And then you have an obligation to your seller to present whatever napkin they send you back, right? Okay. Second thing, what you focus on expands. We are not going to have as many commission objections as you think. I promise you. I promise you, the industry will not change that dramatically. It really won't. The only thing that's going to change, as I said before, we can't wave a red flag saying what we're going to offer a buyer's agent in the MLS. Whoop-de-freaking do. I don't care. The second thing that'll change moving forward, just like I've been doing for the past 20 years in my family, I'm going to have a buyer consultation. I'm going to disclose how I'm going to represent a buyer. They're going to sign a contract. Those are the only two things that change. Our business didn't all of a sudden hit the brakes. So what you focus on expands, don't freak out.
Awesome, you guys. Well, thanks so much for being on. It's Friday. And hey, listen, if you have any questions for me, Coach Denny Grimes at Gmail. I'm happy to help you out. I'm here to help you get better. Share Recon, join Recon, share the mastery call with other people. And if you haven't, check out my YouTube channel. Matt, thank you. Don, Louise.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys for being on.
Thank you guys. We'll see ya.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.